Welcome to the first of 3 videos that will be produced for the HSC Judaism Depth Study, which is designed around the requirements of the New South Wales Studies of Religion syllabus. This video addresses the significant person component of the unit through a study of Moses Maimonides. Moses clearly fits the bill of a significant person when statements like, "From Moses to Moses, there are none like Moses," are used to describe him. The first Moses in that statement is the Moses in the basket, the Prince of Egypt, the Exodus story, the parting of the Red Sea, the 10 Commandments, that Moses. The latter being the man of this depth study. So let's start with this name which I often struggle to pronounce. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon is a starting point at least. This is his Hebrew name, and to make life a little easier, it's often shortened somewhat to Rambam. The Latin version is actually the one that we most typically use in Western culture today, being Moses Maimonides. And it's actually a Greek-style suffix, ides, which means son of, which helps us tie all these names together. In much the same way as Jesus is often called Jesus of Nazareth, or perhaps, as he would have been known, Jesus, son of Joseph, Moses is given a similar treatment. Ben actually means son of, so we get Moses, son of Maimon. Hence, we get the link to Maimonides. Regardless, Moses is what I'm going to call him from now on, so you know that I'm referring to this Moses and not the other Moses. Let's start then with the end in mind. What can the Board of Studies actually ask in the HSC? Well, the syllabus is fairly simple on this front. They actually use more words listing the people that we can choose from than telling us what we need to know about them. For me, the words explain, contribution and impact stand out. In short, we need to be able to say what happened, why did it happen, and what was left behind. If you like, who was he, what did he do, and what was his legacy? So, who was he? While the HSC examiners are unlikely to ask for his biographic details, it helps us understand the latter 2 questions. He lived between these dates and lasted 69 years. It's rumoured that his heavy workload led to his early death, but realistically, 70 was a pretty good innings for someone at the time. He grew up in Spain, but due to hostilities against Jews, was forced to escape. The significant part of his life involved the Holy Lands, but more importantly, Egypt. For those who are geographically challenged just as I am, we're talking about starting in Cordoba here, as well as moving through Jerusalem and Cairo. Today we tend to define people, in the modern setting perhaps unfairly, by their job. Moses would have done pretty well in today's social scale. He was a medical professional, with an interest in the sciences, but his interest in Jewry is what makes him the focus of this study. The philosophical insights and scholarly documents that he produced are still echoing today. So let's move on then to what did he do. It was in his role as physician that he had access to nobility. Saladin was the first Sultan of Egypt, and historically a significant fellow himself. His protection of Islam is a whole different study, but needless to say, he was a bigwig of the day. Moses was appointed as his physician, which he did as a day job. In the evenings, he would tend to many of the Jewish community, and even after the death of Saladin, Moses was kept on as a physician to the royal family. In the religious realm, his father Maimon was appointed to one of the top jobs in the Jewish community of Cairo, but upon his death, Moses was promoted and took over the role of chief priest of Egypt. Interestingly, this role remained in his family for 4 generations, a bit like the family business. Moses was a prolific writer. The 3 most significant texts listed deal with the law and the philosophy at the time. Let's take a look at each in turn. Perhaps because of the age of the faith, many of the oral laws and traditions were just that, oral. Moses appointed himself to document them in a logical and some argue beautiful way. It took 14 separate books to deal with the content and is no small volume. This work aimed to work with the scriptures so that if a follower had a good grounding in both texts, their understanding of the faith would be complete. The commentary on the Mishnah is not dissimilar to a modern commentary of politics or sporting events. It aims to make the text more accessible. Just as a football commentator explains the referee's rulings or discusses tactics, this text delves into the original text and draws out simpler meanings for those who are not able to draw those inferences for themselves. The commentary on the Mishnah, chapter 10, Maimonides manages to formulate 13 principles of faith. They summarised, if you like, what he viewed as the required beliefs for Judaism. Finally, we come to the guide for the perplexed. Its purpose is to promote the true understanding of the real spirit of the law, to guide those religious persons who, adhering to the Torah, have studied philosophy and are embarrassed by the contradictions, or at least the apparent contradictions, between the teachings of philosophy and the literal sense of the Torah. The following text comes directly from the introduction to the guide. While these three texts are by far the most well-known and the significant, Moses was no slouch when it came to writing. His documentation of the theological, philosophical and medical insights changed their respective fields. In the medical field, he documented conditions including asthma, diabetes, hepatitis and pneumonia. He was a genuine academic and a scholar of all fields that he turned to. Finally then, we come to his legacy. This is the area where the HSC markers are likely to target. Ultimately, it's his contribution at the time, which we did in the last section, and his longer-term impact that has scope for extended response-style questions. As an example, here is the 2011 Section 2 question, which includes 12 of 15 possible marks on what he did and his legacy. Additionally, here's the 2012 extended response, which is 20 marks or 40% of the 1 unit exam, which fits so perfectly into the Rambam story that it could not be easier. Note that the exclusion of Moses is saying no to the other Moses. Rambam is fine. His legacy really comes from his personal experience and his education, which led to his writings. If it was not for the Islamic societies that he was immersed in, he would never have seen a need to document the oral tradition. In fact, it was the calibre of scholarship in the Islamic culture that gave direction to his own contribution. While Moses' writings were initially criticised by some, they have stood the test of time and have become central tenets over the centuries. The intention of Moses to open up the faith and make its teachings accessible to its followers was groundbreaking at the time. This decentralising of knowledge and understanding must have been confronting for the power brokers of the day. In a similarly challenging way, the reduction of centuries of tradition and 613 mitzvah into a list of 13 key principles would have been disturbing. Perhaps the intensity of conversation that it would have generated could be regarded as a contribution in and of itself. In contrast to the first two documents that we've addressed, the Guide for the Perplexed was a document designed for those further down the path of studying Judaism. Its assumption that the reader had a good grounding in both the written and oral law, as well as practice, places the text beyond the level of a novice. It demonstrates Moses' capacity to deal with academic issues at all levels. Whilst the commentary in the Mishnah Torah targeted those seeking to understand the essentials, this text pushed the advanced theologians and philosophers to appreciate the interrelated nature of the two fields, theology and philosophy. If we were trying to summarise his legacy in one slide, we might include the three most significant texts: the opening up of the law and the accessibility that the law generated, as well as the encouragement for Jewish leaders to combat the increasing Islamic presence through scholarship. While Moses' writings are still significant today, they form more of a basis on which scholars have built their work. This generation and documentation of Jewish thinking remains as a high watermark in the academic life of the faith, and without it, the tradition would be far poorer. Finally, as we're looking to apply this content in HSC examinations, some of the more significant and easy to recount quotes are appropriate to finish on. Thanks for watching.